This is Charter Local Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. We're on the Central Coast today, and we are joined by Jim Brescia. He is the superintendent, the elected superintendent for San Luis Obispo County. And we face yet another revolution in education standards. In December, the federal government abolished No Child Left Behind, adopted what's known as Every Student Succeeds. Sir, could you give us a sense of the difference between Every Student Succeeds and No Child Left Behind?
I would say that this was a push from the federal government to allow more local control. If you look at it, the reauthorization of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, and this was retitled, as you said, and it replaces the NCLB, the No Child Left Behind. There is more local control. There is more control from the state. There is more push for career and technical education concepts in there. There's still an assurance of accountability, and we're moving into the testing measures in that, and the annual assessments will be in place.
But let's talk about what No Child Left Behind had been doing. No Child Left Behind had been so draconian in its demands that there were schools in California deemed failures. I mean, literally labeled failures.
Correct.
And that label was causing the potential to lose significant funding. Waivers were requested, waivers were denied. I mean, it was an absolute mess. And so while the pendulum has swung a bit to prevent these draconian punishments, has it swung too much so now there isn't accountability?
No, there will still be accountability with testing, but I believe that the local communities in the state, education is a function of the state, and you saw previously overstepping of the federal government into really a function of the state.
But at the same time, sir, you have an increase in local control as a result of Every Student Succeeds. We have the local control funding formula in California, which further devolves control to the local government. But then the overlay of that is Common Core, which is trying to set some type of national standards. So I'm feeling a little schizophrenic.
I would agree. I think that can be confusing, but looking at where we're going as a nation and then allowing each state and each district to chart a course and how they move there really embodies what we should be doing nationally.
Does Common Core allow states to chart their own course?
The framework of Common Core has been adopted by California, but it really is the California standards, and they're different. So if you look at what we're doing here, what Texas is doing, what Utah is doing, you will find a lot of similarities.
And it's interesting. I have the good fortune of traveling around the country and interviewing folks in your position. In California, I don't very often hear complaints about Common Core.
I believe we were ahead of the game. I believe we were really pushing critical thinking and moving more to logical problem solving.
But you go to these other states, Common Core is a four-letter word. It's just interesting how Common Core has rolled out differently in different regions.
I agree, and I think you also see that as just how we function as a democracy. You see, please don't tell me what to do from the federal level. You're going to see stronger opinions in different states.
So as part of Common Core, all states, including California, have adopted a new standardized test formula. And that's also in the background of, like you said, Every Student Succeeds, minimizing the importance of standardized tests, and President Obama saying in October that he wants districts to spend no more than 2% on these types of assessments. So we had our first results for the California Assessment of Student Performance and Progress. They came out, I think it was in January. They were the 2015 tests that were taken last spring. Oh my, the results were not so strong.
The results were across the board, and if you look at populations, there's a significant portion of our population in this state that we need to pay attention to.
And let's talk about those distinctions. When you look at Asian American children in California, 72% were meeting English standards. When you look at Anglo Americans on English standards, 61%. When you look at Latinos, 32% met standards. African Americans, 28% met standards. That's not a rounding error.
No, and I think that looking at that data, it forces school districts and local community to say, how are we focusing our resources, our efforts in addressing the needs? The local control funding formula is just targeting that. You're looking at students in low income, students who are English language learners, students who are foster and homeless, students who are at risk, and bringing this all together is forcing the community to say, how do we maximize that? And it isn't going to be equal. There's been a lot of angst over you're targeting additional funds at populations that are at higher risk.
What I found most interesting is when you looked at the statistics for economically disadvantaged, regardless of race, that could include Anglos, could include Asians, 31% met standards in English, and 21% met standards in math. That, I think, may be the most telling stat of all.
Absolutely. If you look at factors that determine success of children, primarily you're looking at the caregiver, the home environment, their education level, their engagement. Socioeconomics is another huge factor. Children born into poverty are more at risk than children who are not born into poverty.
So does the local control funding formula look at economic disadvantage or race?
It looks at both. I mean, it's not looking at race. I'm sorry. You're looking at English language learners. So
that could be any race.
Exactly, and that is often in
I knew
California.
the answer to that question.
Yes.
So in some ways, the results bear that out. They're looking at socioeconomic status, and they're looking at language acquisition. So hopefully we were smart with the LCFF.
I would agree, and I think it's targeting the funding and targeting the resources where we are going to need more efforts.
I want to talk about the resources in the classroom, and that the key resource is the teacher.
Absolutely. Those are those other factors. I was saying you have the home environment, that environment, you have socioeconomics, you have who's in front of the classroom and who's in front of the school. Those are huge variables in student success.
So the teacher, you know, over the last 10 years, teachers are either revered or reviled, depending on whom you speak. Should we consider standardized tests for teachers? Should we pay them more or less? Pensions, etc. But what we do know is we look at the future and our need for teachers, and we don't have enough teachers graduating from college.
No, we had a perfect storm that hit us. If you roll the clock back to 2000, the Cal State system, the whole CSU campus system, 23 campuses, produced approximately 75,000 teaching credentials back then. This year, and by the way, the CSU system is the largest provider of credentials, not only in the state, but in the country. If you look at all 23 campuses. This last year was around 14,000.
Okay, but we get what we pay for. And
well, part of that was the recession.
But one could argue we don't pay our teachers well.
Oh, I would agree. I think but that is a larger picture. We have to work on increasing compensation for our employees across the board, but the funding has to come from somewhere. We're recovering from a recession currently. We're starting to build back programs, and school districts are now just getting their heads above water.
Yet Governor Brown undeniably has a soft spot for K-12 funding, and since the monies have come in a greater amount thanks to Prop 30 and an improving economy, I mean, K-12 is the favorite child.
K-12 is back to where it was prior to the recession.
Just about.
But we still have a few fiscal hurdles to go over that are really falling under the radar. The largest one is the liability hanging out there for the retirement systems.
And that's the push-pull, because on the one hand, we love our students, our child's teacher, but we hate the teachers' union. And I'm speaking generically, of course. So, you know, again, there's a schizophrenia in California. We love our teacher, but we don't love the teachers. And so what do we do? Where do we go from here?
Well, I think we need to, again, look at this profession. This is important for our economy. This is important for our democracy. Having an educated citizenry is vital to our success nationally. And I would say even our national security depends on having an educated citizenry. We have to put a stable funding source in place for school. It cannot just be based on these blips.
That's a bigger conversation. His name is Jim Brescia. He is the elected superintendent in San Luis Obispo County. I'm Brad Pomerance on the Central Coast. It's Charter Local Edition.